Welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast with big new ideas about credit unions and conversations about innovative technology with credit union and fintech leaders. This podcast is brought to you by Quillo, the real-time loan syndication network for credit unions, and by your host, longtime credit union and financial technology journalist Robert McGarvey. And now, the CU 2.0 podcast with Robert McGarvey.
Go back when I started to report on credit unions, and there were over 8,000 of them in the United States. Now there are 4,370. Just in 2020, there were 5,099 credit unions. In 5 years, the count is down by 700 plus. The math is going forward to extinction. That's why I smiled when I saw Jason Stverak's CU Insight piece on why small credit unions matter and how we can help them thrive. Jason is Chief Advocacy Officer at DCUC, the Defense Credit Union Council, and is a past podcast guest. There's a link to that show in the show notes. So why is he advocating for helping little credit unions stay alive? I had to get him on the show. This episode was recorded on November 12, just hours before the federal government reopened, after the longest shutdown in history. We start by talking about what's going on in Washington, D.C. now, and quickly move into why DCUC has become an aggressive lobbyist, and then we focus on why small credit unions matter, why DCUC cares, and what the credit union movement can do to help more small credit unions stay alive and thrive. It's all good stuff. Listen up. How are you? What are you doing?
Just waiting for the government to reopen. So, they'll take that vote at 8 p.m. tonight, and then we can get back to, the normal work of fighting for credit unions. So,
well, what have you been doing for the last 40 some odd days? I'm not your boss. I'm not going to dock your pay or anything. Just curious.
No, I mean, a lot of it is our megaphone or our communication channels kind of ramped up in terms of getting almost daily or hourly asks from both Democrats and Republicans, like, what are you guys doing to help people? What are the programs that you have going on? How can I help, or how can I be informed? And making sure that what our credit unions did from day one, their members of Congress knew, and they could also help share that information, but also that we could help promote, obviously what's going on. Now, the regulatory side didn't stop. They kept sending out letters asking for new things that kept moving forward. But, the work on the NDAA was still going on behind the scenes by staff. So it's not as if our work stopped. It's just that there just weren't as many committee hearings going on.
Now, what's going on at NCUA?
In terms of
anything, everything. I mean, is there any probability that they'll increase the number of board members, or actually add some?
Oh, I mean, statutorily, no. But will the administration start filling out the rest of them? I think they're in a holding pattern. I think pretty much everybody is until, the Supreme's rule on the court case. Not this one, but dealing with the presidential powers and removing of independent directors. I think once that happens, I think you'll have either a green light or a red light in terms of how, having the administration announce their nominees. I know they're out. I know they're out vetting people. So
now I hear things are proceeding much more slowly internally at NCUA due to the staff reduction. Have you heard similar?
I haven't. I was just testifying over in front of the board at the budget hearing, and obviously you have, your little 930 employees. I mean, that is a 23% reduction. You still have a few of those that are going to come off because some took buyouts and they're working until December 31st. I have not heard any complaints along those lines. I think that what you're going to see with the reduction in staff is that you're going to see, as they've talked about, expanded time between exams, those types of things. But I have not heard of a work slowdown or any complaints about that.
Has DCUC taken a position vis-a-vis that extended time between exams probability?
Our position that we expressed in during the budget hearing was that if they have a reduction in resources, both either staff or financial, then use those resources where they make the most impact. For a well-run Camel 1 or 2 credit union, then maybe you don't need to have the most. You can extend that exam period out, but for ones that need more oversight, that's where you should focus your resources. So that's kind of the position that we've taken on the issue, is that dedicate your resources where they are needed most, and that as you are requesting information from credit unions, not just blindly go down a checklist, say, okay, I need this document. Okay, why do you need this document from this credit union? So that it saves times on both ends in justifying the request of information and the work that a credit union has to do to comply.
Yeah, and I think Navy Federal, which I know is no longer a DCUC member, or unless it's rejoined.
Nope.
I think they need to an exam once a year. I don't think so. Not really.
I don't. I think that if there are systemic problems, that's where you put those resources. But if you have a well-capitalized, well-run credit union, whatever its size, then you can say, hey, let's do 4, and instead of every 2, justify the need for a shortened period of time between exams, because sometimes you get it so like you're going off one exam and going on to another. So we need to make sure that we are removing as many administrative hurdles that credit unions have that prevent them from fulfilling their daily mission of opening the doors at each of their branches and being there to serve their members and their communities.
Now, DCUC has been, to my eyes, increasing its lobbying team, not necessarily with employees, but with consultants, et cetera, pretty aggressively. Why?
To respond to the needs of our members. We have grown our membership since March by about 35 to almost 40%, and we're announcing almost a new member a week, and we're very proud of that record. So that to ensure that we are able to adequately represent their needs and get the changes that will benefit them and their ability to serve their members, then we've kind of adopted, we call it kind of a Green Beret advocacy, that as issues are out there, we'll staff up, and staff down as much as needed. But you have to remember, most of this year we've been helping lead the movement on the tax issue. That was from January on, when the memo was leaked to the press about the 55-page memo of how do we pay, essentially what are the pay fors for the big beautiful bill, and right there listed is the credit union tax status. We're not going to spare an expense to ensure that credit union interests are protected. And I think that we've done an incredible job at that, which is proven by, the fact that more and more credit unions are coming to DCUC and asking to join.
Now, DCUC membership, I saw just this week, I think Desert Financial in
Yep. Just
Phoenix, and
yep. Yep. Yep.
I live in Phoenix, and
Uh-huh.
they're a big dog here.
Yeah.
But
9
they're
billion. Yeah.
also an educators credit union.
Hmm.
I mean, historically.
Yeah.
So what's the criteria? What and also a guy I like very much, Peter Rice at Hanscom.
Yeah. Great
Now
guy.
that's a classic military credit union.
It
But
is, and you have to, we are, evolving as the movement has changed, but also as how our credit unions serve their communities. Every credit union in their field of membership has a veteran or somebody who knows a veteran or somebody who is served or is serving, in the United States military. So every credit union can be a member of DCUC. We use the motto of, we're built for defense, but we're open for all, because the issues that impact credit unions, the tax issue impacts PenFed, Randolph Brooks, Hanscom, as you mentioned, as well as it represents Schools Choice and, Black Hills Federal Credit Union in South Dakota. So the need for DCUC to expand to make sure that we are not only representing the views of the traditional on base only credit unions, we represent the entire credit union movement and every credit union that wants to join.
and as you say, unless there's a credit union I'm not aware of for hardcore pacifists or multi-generational pacifists, I don't think there's any credit union that doesn't have some military connection in its membership.
Yeah. And that's great. And honestly, if there was one, more power to them. That's great. That's what the cooperative method is. It's kind of like you've got credit unions that are on, at coal companies. We have credit unions that are only do green lending or only for environmentalists. So I think that power of the power of the cooperative model in terms of, putting your money, where you want it to go is incredibly powerful. And it's in the power of the credit union movement.
Now let's shift gears to why I reached out to you, which was that
Okay.
CU Insight piece where you put forth the proposition that essentially it's in the interest of all credit unions to keep small credit unions alive.
Absolutely.
And I first heard that proposition from Jim Blaine, who at the time was CEO of State Employees Credit Union, the second biggest credit union in the country. And I said something to Jim like, why are all these credit unions walking the hill with their tiny things? And he said, you don't get it, man. In a lot of legislators' offices, I'm representing a big bank. These are representing the people. Now, Jim was also understanding his influence, at least on North Carolina politicians.
Right.
But he was sincere in saying we need the voices of the small credit unions to have more credibility in Washington, D.C. in particular. Now, so then preparing for this, I looked in 2019, there are 5,236 federally insured credit unions.
Right.
In July of this year, there were 4,370.
Yep.
That's down, I don't know, 800, something like that.
Yep.
And there's roughly 100 credit unions that aren't federally insured, but it doesn't really affect the numbers. When I started writing about credit unions many years ago, there were over 8,000 credit unions. So we're approaching about
15,000.
We're approaching about a 50% reduction.
Yeah.
It's and at this rate, I'm not going to do the math about when we reach just Navy Federal. And Schools First probably would claim they'd be alive too. Okay, there'll be a couple.
I think Bill would make sure they are. So
yeah, it's so it's but the trend line is obvious and serious, a big deal. So then what can happen to keep these small credit unions alive?
I think there's a myriad of options. I think that, support from within the industry. I think in my article I've talked about publicly kind of an obligation for large credit unions to assist smaller credit unions. One of the issues for smaller credit unions is economies of scale and being able to handle processes or advice or help, moving forward. If there is an ability for a larger credit union to provide training or resources for small credit unions, I think that improves the overall health of the entire movement. Because I think, you mentioned Mr. Blaine's comments, and I used to work up on Capitol Hill, and to an extent, he is right that when you have a Navy walk in, or or a large credit union for that area, in a lot of elected officials' minds and others, they see asset size and they're thinking, oh, you're too big to care about the little people. And our ability to ensure that within our DNA, whether you're Navy size or Tri-City size in Washington State, you are working to serve your communities, but it is incredibly helpful. I can talk to you on the advocacy side and the political side to be able to walk in and say, here's a $50 million credit union serving this community. And here's the CEO that is the fill-in teller on Mondays because they don't have enough staff. That's incredibly important if we want to ensure that there are members of Congress and their staff that want to or will help and help advance the credit union proposals that are in front of them. Now, the definition of what a small credit union is always kind of a floating one. You have the 500 million for complex or not. You've got the numbers of 100 million, as an exact definition of the NCUA. You have $500 million credit unions called them small. You have $40 billion credit unions refer to themselves as small. And I hope that every credit union, regardless of size, wants to kind of have that moniker of a small credit union because of what it represents. It represents, that tie to community, that they know your name when you walk in the door. They've got that cup of coffee with the loan officer, and they're talking about the local high school football game that the previous Friday, and what the loan that you need. So there's that discussion of small credit union as a thought or of how you should act, but it is a challenging, to say the least, process to walk in and say, here's a 10 billion, here's a 9 billion, here's a 20 billion. And they're looking at you and say, okay, where's the 50? Where's the $100 million? Because you need all of them in the circle of the movement, healthy and happy and successful, so that the movement and the credit union industry will be here 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And there's going to be continued consolidation, whether it is changing demographics in rural America, where I'm from, changing technology, et cetera. But we need to work as an industry to put in place support from credit union to credit union, and also regulations and rules in place or repeal some of them, so that credit unions do not need to merge based upon the cost of filling out paperwork. That it should be a community-based decision, not a, do we have the resources to make sure we're filling out every SARS report, that nobody in Washington, D.C. ever reads. I'm sorry for a kind of a longer answer on that one.
Oh, I agree. And go back to state employees. When Latino Credit Union was founded in North Carolina, for many years, maybe still today, I don't know, state employees did their core processing free, I think free of charge. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I know Jim Blaine wasn't making any money on that processing.
Well, and I think that if you can find more examples of that across the country, I think that's important, because if we are not making it attractive as a viable prospect in a community to start a credit union, then we're not going to have new credit unions start, and we're not going to have credit unions stay in those communities. I come from, the Dakotas, where, most Native American reservations have no financial institutions, branches on their area, on the reservation, and that's inexcusable in terms of the ability to serve an underserved population. So, what can we do as an industry to make it? I'm not even saying profitable. I'm saying making it, having the ability to start and grow and maintain credit unions in towns of 5,000 to, communities inside of New York City that want to start one.
Well, I don't think running Latino credit unions numbers cost state employees anything. I think they had excess capacity in their system, which I have in my house, not enough to run a credit union, but it's not unusual to have excess capacity. You say, hey, we can help you out here, and we'll down the line we'll figure out if you need to get your own stuff. But for now, sure, we can get you going.
Well, and I would hope that more credit union CEOs and boards would say, okay, what can we do to help? And not see, if you're a $185 billion credit union, I think you should not be concerned of a $35 million credit union and helping them. That you're not going to lose market share if you help them with some of their back office stuff, or provide strategic advice, or as you're doing employee trainings, invite their employees to come over. So that's not an expense that they have to have on their books. So I think that, by fully embracing the principles that we have as an industry, I think it will be helpful to the stability, survivability, growth of our smaller credit unions all across the nation.
Well, and another way to look at it is, some years ago, I added up the assets of all the credit unions, and all of them together, including Navy Federal, had fewer assets than JP Morgan Chase. And then a few years after that, I looked at it again, and Chase had increased the margin a lot. It was fairly close the first time I did the numbers, and a few years later, I was like, wow, there's a big gap opened up here. And so all these guys are kind of small. And as I say to credit unions, I don't personally know Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, but I'd bet any amount of money he does not wake up in the morning saying, what the hell did Navy Federal do yesterday? He might say, what did Citicorp do yesterday? Or what did Deutsche Bank do yesterday? But he just... I'm sure he wishes the best to Navy Federal as far as he has.
Yeah, and I was blessed up on Capitol Hill, working for Senator Kevin Cramer. Still is on the Senate Banking Committee, and I would be in the meetings with Moynihan from Bank of America and Wells Fargo and Citi and Jamie actually from Chase. And yeah, the we're fearful of credit unions was never mentioned in any of those meetings. It was more, their peers are, our Bank of America or HSBC or Credit Suisse. Those are the ones they're taking over. But none of those institutions I just named care about a timber community in northern Idaho of 10,000 people, because it's a blip on their books. In those communities, it's community financial institutions, and I will give a shout out to community banks that have dug in and are helping small communities across this country, and they're facing the same pressures that small credit unions are in terms of consolidation, et cetera. So, I think that as it relates specifically to credit unions, we as an industry need to lead to ensure the survivability so that we are not Australia or Canada, where 10 or 15 years from now, we have three. Because, you know, then I mean, how do you serve your community then? How do you serve your field of membership when the entire country is your field of membership?
Yeah. And I think if every credit union of any size decided to do something to help small credit unions in their community, right there, it would make a difference.
Yeah.
It's
And the numbers are still there. I mean, Chase Bank on its own has more assets than the entire credit union industry. I mean,
a lot more.
A lot more. And if, let's just say Navy Federal made the choice and they became a bank, they are on the smallest to small size of a regional bank. And so you need to put things in perspective in terms of size, and this is kind of one of those that I'm going to pull an analogy from Benjamin Franklin that it's a time for all of us to hang together, or we're certainly all going to hang separately. And by that, I'm talking about everybody coming together and saying, what can I do to help? Hey, I mean, if I have it correctly, I think, in the state of Minnesota, they helped start a fully African-American credit union, and they had investments or deposits coming from other credit unions to help support. So those little things are happening generically, not organically across the country. I think it just needs to be, when it happens, praised and celebrated, and also kind of that challenge from CEO to CEO to help each other out. Because you go to my home states of the Dakotas, the largest credit unions are 1 in 2 billion. So it's not like you're at the school choice size or Randolph Brooks size or Penn Fed size. So, but in that community, they're the Navy Federal of North Dakota, that type of discussion. So what can they help do to ensure that, that a 50 or a 10 or $100 million credit union can survive?
Well, one of the principal reasons a credit union emerges is a long-serving CEO retires and no one wants the job.
Yep.
And the board, and I'm not faulting them for this, after trying and trying, they said, we just got to merge out of existence. We got to. But years ago, if you needed a CEO, you could call Jim Blaine and explain your situation, and he might have an employee he would give you, assuming the employee was interested in it.
Right.
He created a lot of CEOs. I mean, dozens and dozens. As people who wanted to run their own shops, they were never going to rise to the very top at state employees. But hey, I got this little $50 million thing over here.
And what you're explaining is kind of the coaching tree that you have in football. Who comes off the Bill Walsh team? Who comes off the Bill Parcells? Because to use your example from Mr. Blaine, it's like, hey, I got somebody who's talented, but they're not gonna run a $50 billion or a $10 billion credit union. They need CEO or C-suite experience. Why not say, hey, you know what? Help that small credit union get a good CEO where you're investing, and I'm just throwing things out here. Maybe, you help with benefits, or you give a grant or something like that, where they get a high quality CEO who learns, and then you have built up a relationship between those two credit unions, but then also you're helping homegrown credit union talent see that, hey, I have a future as a credit union leader in this country. And I know those are radical ideas to do, but credit unions are kind of the original financial, radical changes. You think of it also as like the farm team, in baseball. Like, What are you doing to help, get your hitter from A to double A to triple A to, playing in the majors and that type of thing? What are we as a movement? And while we are separate, we are all together in the movement. What are we doing to help grow our own leaders?
And credit unions still will tell you in many cases that they don't compete with other credit unions, which is not true, but they will tell you that. And they wish it were true in many cases.
Right.
It's then again, many years ago, I asked the then CEO of Navy Federal if he competed with Penn Fed, and there was a long pause, and he said, "No, USAA." It's which was about the same size as Navy. They were
right.
Really, they both had about the same playing weight. So
exactly, and everybody's that way. You do compete. You want to be the biggest, the best. Having the largest membership, all that type of stuff. But that's kind of capitalism in the American way, and that's not something we need to be ashamed about, of wanting to be better or the best. But we also need to understand that we embrace we embrace the financial community in a little bit different way than our friends, the banks, that we want to grow others at the same time. It's not us and nobody else. It's okay. How can we as a movement continue to grow? And we've talked about what individual credit unions can do, but the challenges facing small credit unions and the movement overall is, sometimes mergers happens because you butted up. You're up against the cap on what you realistically can get under your field of membership. What are we doing to help expand credit unions' ability to go get new members, or to people knocking on the door saying, "I want to be a member." Oh no, you don't live on the right street, or you're not at the right company, or you're not in the right county. What are we doing at the state and federal level to fight for? And the banks, are gonna, go tooth and nail. But what are we doing to expand that, changing the discussion from what is the bank getting, what the credit union get to? What are we doing to ensure that the community and the individual in the community has the largest possible choice of financial institutions to serve their needs?
interesting. Many credit unions, including not Navy, but many of the military-themed credit unions, have a backdoor to entry. And the credit union I principally use, I joined. The CEO asked why I wasn't a member. I lived in his state. I knew the guy.
Mhm.
I said, I'm not, I don't have any relationship to the things. And he said, "Hey, man, just give $10 to this charity and you can become a member." And I said, "Wow, really?" And yeah, really. And I've been a member of them for many years now. And more institutions can use that technique.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And we in credit unions have had to be creative to get around these artificial fences that have been placed around their ability to serve the largest population. And wouldn't it be great if anybody who walks in your door in your community, if you have your charter set in the right way, could just join? That's it. I like the fact that you sponsor the local softball team. I want to be a member. I like the fact that you have a debit card that will allow me to donate directly to the museum for every purchase I make. Nobody else in this town does it. That'd be fantastic. And that's just kind of more of an example of credit unions and credit union, more importantly, trade associations getting in and saying, what can we do to remove all of the barriers to credit union? And I'm not saying unbridled growth, but credit unions, communities that they serve, having the ability to say, I want to be a member of my credit union, and not have government tell you, hey, you don't live in the right spot, you can't join. So, I know that doesn't happen overnight, and you can't snap your fingers, but to kind of paraphrase John F. Kennedy's speech at Rice University about why does Rice play Texas? They do it because it is hard. And why are we going to the moon? Because it is hard. And those are the types of challenges that we need to aspire to as associations and movement to accomplish, and not just be happy with the nibbles around the corner. We need to be big. We need to be bold in terms of the issues that we're going to fight for. Otherwise, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, credit unions are going to be facing the same questions about growth. And maybe we're down to 2,000 credit unions then, because we didn't dig in now to provide the avenues. And I'm not saying everything will work, but to give every credit union and every person who wants to start a credit union, every small credit union, the ability to survive and thrive in their communities.
What are some? I'm familiar with some of the big credit unions in DCUC. What are some of the smaller ones?
Oh my God! I mean, I don't know if you know Doug Wadsworth. He's been a leader in the small credit union movement, Tri-Cities up in Washington. It'll be announced, and probably just going to get an angry email from the communications press secretary. But that they've joined. We've got credit unions all across this country. A great CEO in credit union, Frontier Community Credit Union in Kansas, under Michael Augustine, is one, and they are a strong and vibrant credit union. And when I say smaller, I mean we're blessed to have membership from PenFed at the all the way down to I think Hickam, if I'm remembering correctly. Out in Hawaii is 30 to 50 million, and hopefully I've got that number correctly from a conversation. So DCUC has the biggest of the big and the smallest of the small, and every one of them has a seat at the table to help this organization chart a bright future for all credit unions.
Now, one point you made in your CU Insight piece was that most trade associations, the biggest members, also A, pay the most dues, and B, have the most influence. I mean, I worked for many, many, many years ago, I worked for a very big trade association in Washington, D.C., which had thousands of members, but I'd say about 8 had significant influence. And these were they weren't that as big as the numbers I'm going to give you. These were many billions of dollars in annual sales. Many billions were the 8 big ones. And the other guys, yeah, you have a say here. Sure you do. Come on in. Yeah, sure. Talk to my secretary, by the way.
No, you are right, and I think that that's the sad fact of all associations. And I'm not specifically calling out credit union and trade associations, but I think that DCUC has a little bit of the secret sauce on making sure all voices are around the table. With kind of our due structure, we have a limited due structure. It's capped so that the PenFeds, the ViStars, the Randolph Brooks, your 18, 19, 20 billion, on up, the maximum amount of membership dues that they can pay is $22,500. And we also have, we just as an association, last year, within the last 14 months, our membership voted to double our dues on ourselves because of our growth, but also we hadn't raised our dues since 1996. And so it's based upon asset size. But when you look at that number, it's kind of per capita, so that your input is not based upon the size of your dues check. Everyone's welcome. We're proud to have on our board. I love when I can email them. Ron Aoki, out in Hawaii is a small credit union. Maggie, Maggie at Keys Federal down in Key West, of which I need to make sure I can get a trip down there this winter. She's the chairman of our board, the chair of our board, and she's a small credit union CEO and leader. So, in our DNA as an organization is all sizes of credit unions working together for the movement. We also have we call it a limited membership for, you're just not allowed to vote, and that's capped at $3,000. So again, the large can only write a $3,000 check. And we actually, for credit unions of 100 million and below, we actually reduced our dues, to write, so that many of them write like $1,000 check or a $2,000 check. And so, when you're looking at, your spreadsheet at the end of the year of what you can be a part of, that return on investment for advocacy, working with associations, you're not going to find anything better than DCUC, because not just based upon, the amount, but the fact of how the organization is structured to ensure that everybody is asked for their opinion to help and improve the organization.
Now, I'm not asking you to criticize the largest credit union trade association, but if I'm a credit union and I say, okay, guys, I belong to that larger one, why would I want to join you too? And I assume most of your members also belong to that one. Perhaps I'm wrong.
Yeah, because they're able to on a cost side. And, we don't offer trainings and education. We partner with other organizations to make it available to them, whether it's CUES and NACUC and others. The movement.
But what do you offer that I'd want to join?
Oh, you're not going to get better advocacy. You're not going to get, I think you're going to see as a part of us in 2026, our growth in regulatory advocacy, in terms of.
Now, you hired, or not hired, but you brought on a consultant whose specialty is regulatory advocacy.
Absolutely. And we're going to be launching in January, monthly regulatory calls with whoever you designated your credit union to call and talk with everybody about what you're experiencing, what letters we're writing, so that you have direct input on everything that's going on. So, advocacy is at the heart of what we do as an association organization, but also there are very unique things that relate to dealing with the DOW, the Department of War now, in regulations, et cetera. If you serve on a base or you serve a veterans community, that we have unparalleled experience with. And that, if somebody walks in and says, hey, I need to apply for my VA home loan, and you're not in a traditional strong military veterans area, you don't know how to do that. With us, we actually built out an entire series of pamphlets or educational documents, for veterans and for active duty, and also for the credit union teams, for them to be, how do you deal with the military? How do you deal with the fact that, okay, I just got called up to active duty, and that changes your status in terms of sometimes direct deposit or insurance and things like that. Or, hey, I'm having an issue with somebody trying to come onto base. We have the exclusive agreement. How do we have the ability to bring in decades upon decades of experience in leadership to not only defense credit unions, but every credit union, on how to navigate everything over at the DOW moving forward. And when you tag that with aggressive, nimble advocacy at the federal and state level, on both Capitol Hill and the halls of our regulators, the return on investment for a credit union leader is unparalleled.
Before we go, think hard about how you can help support this podcast so we can do more interviews with more thoughtful leaders in the credit union world. What we're trying to figure out here in these podcasts is what's next for credit unions. What can they do to really, really, really make a difference in the financial scene? Can't all be mega banks, can it? It's my hope it won't all be mega banks. It'll always be a place for credit unions. That's what we're discussing here. So figure out how you can help. Get in touch with me. This is rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Robert McGarvey, again, that's rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Get in touch. We'll figure out a way that you can help. We need your support. We want your support. We thank you for your support. The CU 2.0 podcast.